In December, Bangladesh went to the polls, with Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina securing a landslide victory. She said she won on the back of Bangladesh's impressive economic record and a decade of growth. Her opponents say she stole the election.
We are rejecting the results.
While international monitors accuse her of silencing her critics and muzzling the press.
The gagging of the media, the extrajudicial killings, the disappearances.
So, is Bangladesh becoming a one-party state? And whilst hosting over 1 million Rohingya refugees fleeing Myanmar, how long can and will Bangladesh protect them?
I'm Mehdi Hassan, and I've come here to the Oxford Union to go head-to-head with Gauhar Rizvi, the International Affairs Advisor to Bangladeshi Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina and a historian and former academic. I'll challenge him on whether democracy is dying in Bangladesh and whether his country should be doing more to help Rohingya refugees.
Tonight, I'll also be joined by Tasneem Khalil, a Swedish-Bangladeshi journalist and author of Jallad, Death Squads and State Terror in South Asia. Saeeda Muna Tasneem, Bangladesh's High Commissioner to the UK and Ireland, and Abbas Faiz, a South Asia analyst at the UK's Essex University who previously worked for Amnesty International for more than 30 years. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Gauhar Rizvi. Gauhar Rizvi has held senior positions in universities around the world, including Oxford, Harvard, and the University of Virginia. He's worked for the Prime Minister for a decade, and his role is the equivalent to that of a cabinet minister. Gauhar Rizvi, following your party, the Awami League's recent landslide election victory in December, it does look more and more like Bangladesh is becoming a one-party state, does it not?
I'm surprised that you would say that. This has been said earlier by a number of people.
So it's not that surprising?
No, but I'm surprised that you said it.
Okay.
Because as one who has studied politics, you will understand that just because a party has been elected 3 times, it is not a one-party state.
The reason you're being called a one-party state is not just because you win lots of elections, as you say, many parties do that. It's the margin by which you win. Just to be clear, of the 300 seats contested in the December election, how many seats did your ruling coalition win in Parliament?
288.
288 out of 300?
Yes.
How many did the opposition win?
Well, let me put this question to you.
288 to 7?
Let me put this question to you differently. Give me one good reason why the opposition should have been voted into power. They did not have a manifesto. They were ambivalent whether they will go into an election or not.
So you're comfortable with a 96% of the seats? That's what you want?
Yes.
Sheikh Hasina is now winning the kind of percentage victories that Bashar al-Assad and Kim Jong-un win. 96%.
Right.
You're comfortable with that in a democracy?
No,
you're fine with that?
No. I think the comparison is totally irrelevant. Here, there was 39 political parties contested in the election. Free and fair elections took place. Large number of international observers were there who saw it for themselves. Who would not vote for a government which has performed so brilliantly by any count? And if you want me,
there are many brilliant governments and they win 50, 60, 70%. Okay, you say it's a free and fair election. Let's deal with that point. As you know, the European Union has said there were, quote, significant obstacles which have tainted the electoral campaign and the vote. Transparency International studied 50 constituencies in Bangladesh and found serious irregularities in 47 of them, including fake votes, ballot stuffing, voters barred from entering polling stations. The BBC have footage of a stuffed ballot box in the port city of Chittagong. Are the BBC and Transparency International just making this all up?
One of my closest friends is the head of Bangladesh Transparency International.
Okay.
So I'm not going to impute any...
So then deal with the report, 47 out of 50.
I would like... the Election Commission found irregularities in 15 or 19, I forget the exact number of polling stations. And when you remember, there were 40,000 plus polling stations. So if
But here's what I don't get.
15 or 19...
It's not that it's 15 or 19, it's that
irregularities.
your friend's organisation looked at 50 seats and 47 of them turned out to have irregularities.
I am yet to
That's
see
something,
the-
I can't
I'm
do the
yet
maths
to-
off the top of my
I'm-
head, but that's
I'm
like
yet to see the
95%.
evidence.
It's like your
No.
margin of victory.
No. It
Isn't the
happened.
problem that Human Rights Watch describes how opposition members have been arrested, killed, and even disappeared in the months running up to the election? There was a, quote, atmosphere of fear. 150 opposition members were arrested just 2 weeks before the election. Surely that cripples your election campaign if the government keeps arresting your members.
These were people who committed arson and killing in the months of January to March 2015. After that, they went underground. They hid. At the time of the election, they resurfaced. There were allegations, criminal charges against them. And so when they resurfaced, they were arrested.
Well, I just want to deal with some of the people you put criminal charges against in the opposition. You said that a man called Mintu Kumar Das, a Dhaka BNP leader, was charged with blocking a road in September 2018. The problem is he died in 2007. Isn't this embarrassing for your government?
Of course it is embarrassing.
You're throwing criminal charges at opposition members who are dead.
You know, when such charges are made, it is embarrassing. But one knows that in police investigation, in many societies, especially in developing countries, often have these shortcomings.
It's not just the opposition that have been on the brunt of your government. The media have had some issues, I think it's fair to say. Let me quote you. You said civilization cannot flourish without freedom of expression.
Indeed.
Censorship never works, which is a good line, but in practice, there have been numerous examples of media crackdowns. Perhaps the most famous case is that of the photojournalist Shahid al-Alam, who was dragged from his house by police after documenting a student protest in August and then criticizing your government on this channel, actually, on Al Jazeera English. Sheikh Hasina, your prime minister, described Mr. Alam as, quote, mentally sick. Do you think he's mentally sick, or is he just a journalist trying to do his job?
Those who are familiar with the media in Bangladesh will know one thing. It is free, it is vigorous. Shahid al-Alam was not arrested for appearing on Al Jazeera and making a comment. He was arrested for spreading disinformation, which was inciting violence. Shahid is my very close friend.
Shahid al-Alam told reporters outside court in August that he was beaten so badly by police that his tunic needed washing because of all the blood. He was jailed for 107 days and said he was tortured. Is that how you treat your friends?
Listen, I have not said a word about his treatment. All I have said is Shahid is a close friend of mine, and when he was arrested, I took it on myself to make sure that he was given proper medical treatment. His family was able to carry food for him.
Okay.
And
why did he need medical treatment?
Well, not because of the beating that you said.
You're denying that he was beaten by the police?
I did not deny that. Because I cannot deny it because I do not know what happened.
Okay.
All I am going
Is your
to say...
friend mentally sick?
No.
Why did the Prime Minister say he's mentally sick?
I have no idea about that. I don't know what she had in her mind, but if somebody spreads disinformation, which endangers life, which incites
violence... What was
violence,
that disinformation, just before we move on?
That there were several people killed and whose dead bodies were hidden in Awami League office in Dhanmandi. Women were raped. And, no, just wait, don't say no.
Hold on. But even if it was false, you think it's worth locking him up?
I stand by my court, and I will go to my death saying the same thing, that without freedom of expression, our civilization will collapse. So, on the other hand, the government has responsibility to protect citizens.
Agreed. Let's bring in our panel, who are waiting patiently to come in here. I'm joined by Tasneem Khalil, a Swedish-Bangladeshi journalist, author of Jallad, Death Squads and State Terror in South Asia. Tasneem, do you think it's fair to say that Sheikh Hasina is turning Bangladesh into a one-party state, into an authoritarian state, as many journalists are claiming, especially in the West?
Yes, Mehdi. Sheikh Hasina has not only turned the country into a one-party state, and she has very successfully done that. She has very capable advisors like Dr. Rizvi, who would come on international television and very eloquently, try to defend her. But the truth remains that Bangladesh is a country where people are picked up from their homes, they're abducted, they're kept in secret detention. There is a program of enforced disappearances. People are extrajudicially executed. People are imprisoned in thousands. We saw during the recent elections. And even anyone who the regime thinks that is a problem, they go after him or her with absolute viciousness.
And just on his point about free and fair media, everyone in this hall would agree it's a free, fair, vigorous media. You're a journalist, you no longer live in Bangladesh. What's your view?
Well, Bangladesh is a country where journalists are beaten mercilessly by the goons of Bangladesh Chhatra League, the student wing of Bangladesh Awami League. We have video footage. Of course, Dr. Rizvi would say, well, 1 or 2 journalists getting beaten up, that's nothing to care about, maybe. But it's a very, very dark situation.
Okay, before I bring back in Gawhar Rizvi, I'm going to go to Saeeda Muna Tasneem, who's Bangladesh's High Commissioner to the UK and Ireland. When you hear Tasneem speaking there, it's a litany. But thousands behind bars, extrajudicial killings, enforced disappearances. Must make your job quite hard defending the Bangladeshi government here in the West, here in the UK.
But Tasneem doesn't even live in Bangladesh, so he's seeing Bangladesh from outside, just like you're doing.
Why doesn't he live in Bangladesh?
I have no idea.
Okay, well, come
so what I'm saying is that Bangladesh definitely, in the history of Bangladesh and press freedom, if you look at the 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s, even until 2000, there was just one private TV channel. Right now, Sheikh Hasina, between 2009 and 2018, has opened up the media and 32 private TV channels every day, 90 political talk shows. Sheikh Hasina has been criticized left and right. There are newspapers criticizing Sheikh Hasina, and the parliament she's been criticized. So why wouldn't Bangladesh have press freedom? She doesn't need to put anybody's voice down.
There are also people being arrested for criticizing her too. A woman,
it's just,
a woman for doing a post on Facebook was arrested about
That's a fraction. That's a small fraction. That doesn't mean that Bangladesh doesn't have press freedom.
Before I bring in Abbas Faiz, Tasneem, very quickly, why don't you live in Bangladesh anymore?
As a journalist, I cannot operate independently in the country. I would be abducted, I would be tortured, like Shahidul Alam, my colleague.
And when was that? Which period did he leave the country? Before Sheikh Hasina came into office?
But he's given many examples as well. Let me bring in Abbas Faiz, a South Asia analyst at the UK's Essex University, previously worked for Amnesty International for more than 30 years. Abbas, Tasneem mentioned enforced disappearances as well, something I'm going to bring Gawhar Rizvi back on as well. Can you shed some light on what is going on in Bangladesh with these claims being made about people disappearing?
Well, what is happening in Bangladesh under the current government's watch is really very unacceptable. In terms of democracy, all the independent institutions of the state have been weakened. The parliament has become an extension of the government, and all of these things have happened by the support of people, intellectuals like Mr. Gawhar Rizvi, who are actually falsifying the nature of the issues. Now, to just go back to the enforced disappearances, the way it happens that a group of plainclothes officers go to the house of the people, they collect them, they take them away, and then the police, the security agencies, and all of those people, they just say that they don't have any knowledge of them.
Do you want to respond to Abbas Faiz?
I think if you are saying, Abbas, that this is the government policy, I fear you are mistaken. Government does not need to disappear people. Government have authority to arrest people if they feel somebody has done things wrong.
But you have the responsibility to protect them.
And to remand them.
Okay. Are you denying that people like Mir Ahmed bin Qasim, Hassan Ali, Shafiq al-Islam Modu, who would, in front of their families in many cases, were taken by plainclothes police on CCTV in one case? Were they not taken?
I am going to say again.
Are you denying
and again,
that?
No, I'm
you
saying
asked me for
it
evidence.
It is most deplorable if this is true, or if this were to happen. But other names were also given. The same set of people have resurfaced and are openly moving around in the society.
But not all of the names. If the British
by.
Government and the US government and Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch and Bangladeshi human rights groups are all saying that people are being disappeared, shouldn't you investigate that?
Of course we will investigate.
Independently.
Okay. I want to ask you about the War Crimes Tribunal set up in 2010 by the Bangladeshi government to bring justice for the atrocities that were committed during the War of Independence in 1971. First, these tribunals were welcomed by the international community. However, in recent years, the UN, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, the International Center for Transitional Justice, they've all raised serious concerns about the fairness of these trials, in particular the use of the death penalty. You claim to be part of a progressive party, but you're overseeing tribunals that the International Commission of Jurists says do not adhere to international standards of a fair trial and due process.
Let me first ask you,
Why is it every time I ask you a question you want to ask?
I want to ask you because
that's not how this works.
No, because you have raised the question of international practice, international standards.
Do you not like international
standards?
No.
No. I am going to ask you: is there an international gold standard? No, there isn't. What exists is in every country. The countries have set up their own courts, and where you compare the court is with the normal high court and the appellate division. Was the process followed in the tribunal in any way inferior to our high court and our Supreme Court? No. Bangladesh was the only country which tried war criminals and gave them full right of representation. Full evidence was placed into the hands of their defense lawyers. They were allowed to bring in as many defense lawyers as necessary as witnesses.
What about witnesses who were abducted from outside the court prior to testifying?
I don't know about that particular thing.
The International Commission of Jurists says defense witnesses have been abducted and intimidated, and there are credible allegations of collusion between the government, prosecutors, and judges. Isn't it the case that Sheikh Hasina just wants to get guilty verdicts and therefore cut corners?
First you tell me it is not of international standards. When I tell you that the standards followed in Bangladesh courts were higher than what that happened in Nuremberg trial, is as good as
I don't remember anyone accusing the Nuremberg trials of abducting witnesses outside the court.
No other international tribunal gave an opportunity for appeal. Not only appeal, it also gave Bangladesh rules gave an opportunity for judicial review. If after all these things you say,
I'm not saying
that these
I'm saying
were
international
not fair.
Jurists are saying it, who know their stuff. Okay, let's move on. There was a lot of opposition between quote-unquote secularists and Islamists in Bangladesh. In just 3 years, between 2013 and 2016, as you know, there were 10 brutal murders of atheist bloggers, as well as other activists. Is there zero tolerance for extremists who kill bloggers from your government?
Indeed, yes.
Then why did after the death of one blogger, Avijit Roy, in February 2015, why did Sheikh Hasina's son, an advisor to the government, he said your government, quote, can't come out strongly for him as they don't want to be seen as atheists. Another minister, Sharia Alam, said that while these attacks are not acceptable, at the same time we expect people to stop criticizing the Prophet. From a supposedly secular government, that's a pretty intolerant, some would say cowardly approach to the murder of your own citizens.
I'm not going to defend the statements made by others. You can ask them.
But they're your colleagues.
But what I am going
You're not here to be solo Gohar Rizvi. You're here representing the government of Bangladesh.
What I am going to say to you is government does take very strong action against all crimes, including crimes against bloggers. But what is often not recognized is that there is also another law in the country which says that you can be punished for insulting religious beliefs or hurting religious sentiment.
Is that your version of a blasphemy law?
That is what a blasphemy law is.
So how can you say you're a secular government, secular country?
Of course we are secular.
You're locking up bloggers for offending religious sentiments. How is that secular?
I don't know as yet of which blogger has been arrested for...
Russell Pervez, blogger who fled to Japan after being arrested.
Was he arrested for
insulting religious sentiments? Yes.
No. If you are going to incite violence by inciting...
No. Come on. There's no incite. I'm asking you, are you a secular country if you lock up bloggers for offending Islam? Yes or no?
I do have to, as a member of the government, say that if public safety is endangered, governments have a responsibility.
That's an excuse that many governments use. You say that you're a secular party and secular government. You say your opponents, the BNP, the Bangladesh National Party, are theocratic. You say they're in bed with Jamaat-e-Islami, quote-unquote, Islamists. But some would say that you've gotten into bed with some pretty extreme groups too, the Hifazat-e-Islam movement. You've given in to some of their pretty extreme demands. You even refused your party to condemn them when they recently attacked the education of teenage girls in Bangladesh. Why?
Now, maybe compare like with like. Jamaat is a political party. Hifazat-e-Islam is not a political party.
Irrelevant to my question.
No, it is relevant.
No, I was asking about secularism.
It is.
How are you a secular party if you ally?
I am coming to that.
Okay.
It is a students' movement.
So was the Taliban.
It's a students' movement. There are 1.4 million students studying in in madrasas controlled by the Hifazat group. The government is trying to bring them out, to modernize their curriculum, to make them employable, to train them in modern sciences and education so that they become employable and keep away from radicalism.
No one's saying you shouldn't talk to them.
And that's
it's
what
about giving in to their demands. You say that you're modernizing their curriculum. They seem to be having more impact on your curriculum. They asked for 17 stories and poems to be removed from school textbooks. You agreed. They asked to move a female statue representing justice from the Supreme Court. You agreed. They condemned the education of teenage girls. Your minister said that's fine. It's free speech. You're just appeasing them while telling the world you're secular.
Does it not bear to reflect on the fact that there are more women today in secondary and primary schools than there are men? Is that a restriction?
So do you condemn this group for saying that? You condemn them for saying that teenage girls shouldn't...
Our policy is condemning them.
No, that's not true. Your Deputy Minister for Education refused to condemn them. He said whoever's made the comment is his personal opinion.
I am condemning you. I am condemning.
Good to hear.
And I am saying that it is exactly against the government policy.
Okay, let's go back to our panel. Tasneem Khalil, do you accept that this is about bringing the madrasas and bringing these groups forward, modernizing, getting jobs? What's your position on the relationship between...
Hifazat-e-Islam came to prominence back in 2013 after the murder of a blogger, and their demand was capital punishment for anyone who would criticize Islam and atheists. They would carry placards saying that, kill atheists like you would kill dogs and cats. That is Hifazat-e-Islam. And now Sheikh Hasina has been declared as the mother of Qaumi students in Bangladesh who have very questionable ideas. I am not sure how Islamic they are even.
Sayeeda Muna Tasneem is here, the High Commissioner. What's your response when you hear, for example, it's not just atheist bloggers. There are many minorities in Bangladesh who are upset. The secretary of the Bangladesh Buddhist Federation said that when Hindus, Buddhists and Christians face abuse in Bangladesh, there is no one to turn to for justice. That's quite damning, isn't it, from minorities in your country?
It's actually quite baseless. I think Sheikh Hasina's party has been the most secular party that Bangladesh has ever witnessed. It's very clear that her policies, in her previous government, she had 5 cabinet ministers who are Hindus and Christian and Buddhist. And in this cabinet, she has at least 3 cabinet ministers, full cabinet ministers, who are Hindus and Buddhist. After the Ramu incident, if you recall, Sheikh Hasina has rebuilt 19 Buddhist temples. Has Myanmar built 1 temple, 1 masjid for Muslims?
If Myanmar is your benchmark for minority treatment,
of course not.
We're in serious trouble. But it's not just Buddhists, though, is it? It's Buddhist leaders, Hindu leaders, Christian leaders. They're all saying, we feel under fire.
I wouldn't agree with that. I wouldn't agree with that. Why does she empower women? She empowers women to marginalize extremist forces. And that is how Bangladesh is doing so well economically.
Abbas Faiz is here. What do you make of Gauhar Rizvi's argument that the government has tried its best, and the High Commissioner's argument that has improved things in terms of protections for minorities, protections for atheist bloggers? Is that fair? Have there been massive improvements, do you think, in recent years?
Protection from the minorities, no, the government hasn't done enough at all. Let Dr. Rizvi tell me how many people have been tried and convicted for setting fire on the homes of the Christians, for attacking Hindu minorities.
Good question.
Yes, none have been brought to justice.
You have raised a very important issue. Minorities have often been victims of persecutions. But to say that under this government there has been persecution of minorities, please, I urge you to go back to your sources. I urge you to go back to... The most authoritative voice on this is Hindu Buddhist Christian Association.
They have told me that, exactly.
I don't know what they have told you.
Okay.
They have come to the Prime Minister and they have thanked her. Never in the history of Bangladesh, minorities have enjoyed as much freedom.
Just to be clear, what's the number, though? Just what's the number of convictions?
That I don't know, but I can tell you one thing. When you are next visiting Dhaka, I will be glad to tell you.
All right. On that note, we're going to have to take a break. Do join us on Head to Head for part 2 with Gauhar Rizvi, where we're going to be talking about the Rohingya issue, and we're also going to hear from our very patient audience here in the Oxford Union after the break.
Welcome back to Head on Al Jazeera English. My guest tonight is Gauhar Rizvi, International Affairs Advisor to the Bangladeshi Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. In recent years, Gauhar Rizvi, one of the biggest challenges Bangladesh has had to face has not come from the inside, but from the outside, from neighboring Myanmar. More than 1 million Muslim Rohingya refugees have fled into Bangladesh. It's very admirable that your country has taken in so many refugees. But here's what I don't get. You've called what's happening in Myanmar ethnic cleansing. Your boss, the Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, has called it, quote, tantamount to genocide and crimes against humanity. And yet your solution to the crisis seems to be to try and send the refugees back to Myanmar. It makes no sense, really.
That is the end solution, that these people belong to Myanmar. They want to go back home, and they must go home. However, what we have also said is we will only send them when the conditions are safe and people will go back voluntarily. Very few governments in the world, let alone a developing society, host 1 million refugees and then say, we would like you to go back only when the situation is safe. Now, of course, the problem doesn't lie on Bangladesh side. It lies on Myanmar side.
Agreed.
And what else can Bangladesh do? The responsibility lies with the international community, that they must insist on making Myanmar safe for the return
Agreed.
Of the Rohingya.
In the meantime, though, you say we won't send them back while it's not safe, which is good to hear. And yet in November, there were reports covered by international media, covered by human rights groups, that you were trying to send them back against their will. Security forces were deployed to some of the camps in Cox's Bazar. Refugees were told that if they didn't leave, they would stop receiving rations. They would be blocked from working with NGOs. The UN put out a statement saying, do not send them back against their will. That's what you were trying to do in November, though.
No. Let me clarify. What we had said was those who want to voluntarily return. Because Myanmar government criticized us, saying that Bangladesh is preventing the return, forcibly preventing the return of Rohingyas who want to come back. So we said, if those who would like to leave voluntarily may go. People refused to go voluntarily. We did not push out, we did not force.
The UN referred to terror and panic in Cox's Bazar at the imminent risk of being sent back against their will.
I don't know from where this statement came, but the UNHCR person from Bangkok with whom I worked very, very, very closely, we worked in concert. There was never, ever a question of any forcible repatriation.
And you stuck, that is the policy of the Bangladeshi government?
That is the policy, and this is the policy the Prime Minister has announced again and again, including at the United Nations.
There's also a plan right now, I believe, from your government to send thousands of these refugees to a place called Bhasan Char, an island 3 hours from the mainland, which is particularly prone to cyclones and severe flooding. Human rights groups have warned that it could become an island prison.
Okay. The whole of coastal region is prone to cyclones, storms, tidal surges. So that island is not anything different from the rest of the coastal belt. Second thing is, on the one hand, we are under an enormous pressure from humanitarian organizations that there is congestion in these camps. These camps have become unsafe. Create more space for them so that they can live better. We have developed an island, put protections against surges. We have built cyclone shelters there. But most important of all, we have said to these international organizations, go and see it for yourself, and then these people, if they voluntarily, some of them want to be relocated there, they are welcome to be relocated.
So The Guardian got footage of the island and what's being built there in November 2018. They found that families will be housed in rooms which measure 2 meters by 2.5 meters, which have small barred windows. It does kind of sound prison-esque.
Well, have you been to the Cox's Bazar camp?
No.
If you had been to that camp, I can assure you, you wouldn't have quoted that. Because that accommodation created in Bhasan Char is far, far superior to the current existence of the temporary shelters in which they are living.
Okay, you could allow some other countries to take some of these refugees off your hands, but you don't seem to be letting them. The Bangladeshi government refused exit visas to Rohingya refugee women who had been offered asylum in Canada under a specific program designed to take care of victims of sexual violence. Why would you do that?
When did this happen?
In 2018.
I don't know why this happened, but let me give you a larger explanation. The larger explanation is that there is a fear that if third country settlement begins to happen, and we don't know how many people Canada was willing to take. Yeah. There are 1 million people. If you want to take 50 or 60 people, all it does is it creates hope, those who are left behind in Myanmar, that if you can reach the camps of Bangladesh, you may be resettled in the third. That is the argument. You may refuse it.
It's not a good argument.
You may reject it.
You say that people in Myanmar are facing genocide. If you're facing genocide, you want to get out. It doesn't matter whether you go to Canada or not.
Okay, I did not. I'm saying so. I said this is another argument that has been.
And what about the argument that you could have let more in earlier? It was admirable to let in 1 million people in the last couple of years, but Rohingya refugees have been fleeing the violence there for years now, as you well know, and yet you were turning them back. Between 2012 and 2016, Bangladeshi border guards were turning away refugees in the hundreds. Many of those people who were turned away probably died.
Go one step back. We already had 750,000 Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh. They have been there since the mid-1990s. So to say that we turned some back, which country has allowed so many people into their...
And I said that's an admirable position. What I'm wondering is, given you've let these people in, given you said they're victims of genocide, in hindsight at least, do you look back, Gauhar Rizvi, and say, you know what, I wish we'd let more in earlier. We could have saved more lives.
See, what happens is when they came, your border guards, they are trained to prevent people from coming in. That was their reaction. When this came to the high-level decision, I was present in the meeting that day. All the security forces argued that we should hold them back. Our Prime Minister said, no, this is a humanitarian crisis. Open the frontiers, let them in. And I think this is the only unique example, possibly Angela Merkel was another, where 1 million people nearly were allowed in to the country.
Fair enough. Let me ask you this, last question before we go to our panel and then the audience. You've said Myanmar should be referred to the International Criminal Court at a future stage. Do you think Aung San Suu Kyi, who I know you know personally, do you think she should face an international tribunal as well for her role in this genocide, or at least her role in denying and covering it up?
Whoever is involved should be faced with the International Court of Justice. There is no doubt, because this was premeditated genocide.
So you think there could be a case against Aung San Suu Kyi as well?
It would be against the entire government or any member of government that aided and abetted in this process.
Would you like to see her on trial?
Now, you are asking me to comment on a friend, and I always have a soft spot for friends, and I will hold back.
Okay. Interesting choice of friends tonight. Let's go to our panel of experts who are waiting here in the Oxford Union. I'm joined by Abbas Faiz, who's a South Asia analyst at UK's Essex University. He previously worked for Amnesty International for more than 30 years. Abbas, as a human rights activist and specialist, how worried are you about the fate of Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh today? What's your view?
It is commendable what Bangladesh has done, but that is not enough. They've got to actually start a very strong movement within the international community to ensure that the pressure that is needed to be placed on the government of Myanmar is done. The government of Bangladesh is not doing all of that.
Saeeda Muna Tasneem is here, Bangladesh's High Commissioner to the UK and Ireland. You've also served on Bangladesh's National Task Force on the repatriation of Rohingya refugees. Abbas says you've done well, but not enough.
We have done excellent. We're the only country in the world who's giving maximum protection to the Rohingyas. Why isn't the world doing enough? That should be a question, not what Bangladesh is doing enough. Bangladesh is a country which is an LDC. We are at least Bangladesh is the least developed country. We're the most densely populated country in the world. We are sharing our food and space and sovereign space with the Rohingyas. We've given 6,000 acres of land for Rohingyas. We are protecting 60,000 women who are raped and gave babies, 70,000 babies who are rape babies. We're providing support and shelter to those babies. We're providing health, education, healthcare, prenatal, postnatal to women who are sexually violated in Rakhine State. The question is, why isn't the world doing enough? Would the United Kingdom be ready to take 1.1 million refugees? Would any other countries be ready to do that?
It's a good question. I think we know the answer. Let me bring in Tasneem Khalil, who's a Swedish-Bangladeshi journalist, author of Jallad, Death Squads and State Terror in South Asia. Tasneem, you're a critic of this government. It's very difficult to disagree with what the High Commissioner is saying there. They've done a lot for the Rohingya refugees. This is Sheikh Hasina's finest hour.
The genocide is not something where we just have a competition of who has done enough and who has not done enough. I'd like to ask a direct question to Dr. Rizvi here. You say that you want to see Myanmar tried at the International Court of Justice for genocide. You, on record, said it is a genocide. Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina said it's a genocide. Now, what is stopping you from referring this case to the International Court of Justice under Article 9 of the Genocide Convention?
I think the answer is obviously no, we haven't done it. But, a government which has its hand full, training, feeding, providing health care, to say why the government has that. Of course we will do. Of course we will do. And
thank you.
Whatever it needs
Thank
to be
you.
done.
We're going to wrap this up and let's go to our audience. Raise your hands. I'm going to bring you in as many of you as I can. Let's go to the gentleman here in the front.
I represent Ahmed bin Qasim. He was disappeared by the Bangladesh Special Forces, RAB, in August 2016, with all the evidence pointing to this being done on the direct orders of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. He's only one of hundreds who've been disappeared. These disappearances have been noted by UN human rights bodies, international human rights organizations, the international press, and foreign embassies. When will the Bangladesh government stop pushing the ridiculous line that the disappearances are not happening? And when will these men be released so they can return to their family?
When disappearances happen, it is deplorable. But I have also said that this is not a government policy of removing people.
So where is his client?
I wouldn't know. Since you are the lawyer, you tell us, where is your client? You tell us.
Go on, do you want to respond?
And with proof.
There was credible evidence he was being held in Dhaka Cantonment, a military base in the middle of Dhaka. And that's credible evidence from foreign embassies. And your government knows where he is. No one believes that you don't. You don't even believe.
That's fine.
You don't even believe that.
No, thank you for the statement, but you have said nothing. You have just made a statement that he is
You
located.
asked him a question. He told you where he thinks he is.
No,
now it's your job to go check it out. You're the government.
I will check it
He's
out.
not.
I am prepared to check it out. But when you use the word credible, well, I have to take your word for it.
You want the cell number as well?
Some information.
Come on.
He would give me some information.
Let's go back to the audience. Gentleman here in the front.
Thank you. I covered the Rana Plaza factory collapse and the aftermath of that. And
back in 2013.
2013, which was a convulsive event and which created a lot of promises from the government. I'm just curious because it seems that now, as thousands of workers are demanding fairer wages and have not been allowed to be unionized, they're being shot at, beaten up, and summarily sacked from their jobs.
This is the recent protest you're referring to.
Yes, and despite just 2 days after the election, the government gave a 75% tax break to factory owners, and in a country which has the highest growth rate amongst rich people in the world.
Okay.
I don't know if you have been back since you covered Rana Plaza. Enormous changes have taken place. To begin with, Bangladesh is now fully compliant with its commitment to the ILO Convention. Bangladesh Constitution fully allows unionization. There are no restrictions to it. Working with Accord and Alliance, we have improved and made all the factories safe. We are insisting that the owners provide minimum health care in the factories, And as far as the government is concerned, there is no restriction whatsoever on unionization. So what has happened since?
Do you regret that it took the deaths of hundreds of innocent people for these changes to come about on your watch?
You know, tragically, often a war, a tragedy pushes the momentum and the speed at which changes take place. So yes, in that sense, a tragedy did propel us to move fast.
Okay, lady there, second row.
What are the challenges and vision of present government in Bangladesh after this landslide victory?
Well, our plans and visions are very, very straightforward. We have numerous steps. By 2021, we want to become a middle-income state. By 2030, we want to complete and fulfill sustainable development goals to the extent possible. And by 2042, we want to be a developed country.
Okay, let's go to the lady here in the front.
Hi, you spoke about Shahidul Alam. I'm the niece of Shahidul Alam.
Yes.
We've sat here and heard you say that there's freedom of expression in Bangladesh. But you know what happened to my uncle, your friend, for scrutinizing the government, perhaps not in a dissimilar way from what's happening now as a journalist, the way that Mehdi is a journalist, also scrutinizing your government. We've all listened and laughed and debated about everything that's happening, but the reality is that Bangladesh is a living nightmare for thousands of people. You deny it, but there is torture, extrajudicial killings, disappearances, the ugliest face of the human condition. Okay. And if you're saying that everyone's lying, then I think you're insulting people. I'm asking you as a human being, how do you feel about this? Are you comfortable with this? I'm not asking as a politician, I'm asking you as a human being.
I would like to give you a direct answer. I would really like to give you a direct answer. I understand your pain. And I will also say, with great respect to my friend, Shahid, and to compare him with what this journalist is doing, asking questions, is unfair. As I said earlier, he was not arrested, and I don't think one should be arrested for his journalistic work, but for spreading disinformation. Second thing I want to say, you just said that life is living hell in Bangladesh. Do you have any idea how the quality of life for millions of people have improved in the last 10 years? How millions of people have moved out of extreme poverty and are living? How Bangladesh has achieved higher social indices in all respects compared to all its neighbors.
No one is disputing the economic record, but you are on record. You are on record saying that development is not the same as democracy. You are the same. You are the one who said that.
I said these two go hand in hand.
Exactly.
And you cannot exclude. So I am coming to that. But you said it is living hell for thousands of people. I am telling you, their lives have improved. That is not to say that if there is a breach of human rights, if there is arbitrary arrest of people, that we justify and we applaud. Absolutely not. And that is what I said. The Prime Minister's current agenda, high emphasis is on the question of governance. And when I say governance, it is a shorthand for all the things that all of us aspire to. Full liberty, freedom of expression, a real qualitative improvement in life.
Just on her particular question to you personally, as someone who's not a politician your whole life, the majority of your life you haven't been a politician. You're an academic, a scholar. You were teaching people about the world. When you read these reports from academics, from scholars, from human rights activists, all making the same claims about enforced disappearances, crackdowns on the press, torture, it doesn't bother you at all?
Of course it bothers me. As I said, it is deplorable if these things are true. And I also say to you, whenever this information has come to me, and I cannot at this moment divulge names, I have done everything personally, humanly possible to make sure, including in the case of your uncle, which I do not want to say it publicly.
Okay, let's go back to the audience. Yes, gentleman here in the tie.
Just a direct question to Mr. Rizvi. He is an advisor to the PM. and he's a very intellectual man. But does he call that when there is a crackdown on opposition and there is a extrajudicial killing and enforced disappearances, even the opposition party doesn't have any freedom to gather free assembly or anything, they cannot speak. Is that called democracy in Bangladesh?
What has happened was not a crackdown. What happens is, again, this is the law of the land, that if you want to hold a public meeting, you need to secure the permission of the police department so that adequate facilities are provided. But where the difficulty arose, when two parties decide on the same day to hold their meeting in the same venue. Now, which police force in the world will allow two rival parties to assemble in the same?
Let's go back to the audience.
Dr. Rizvi, you've already answered a couple of questions on the enforced disappearances and some of the other human rights violations, and you've used the term deplorable. Why have you refused to engage with the UN special rapporteurs and working groups when they've tried to engage with you on this issue, and all you do is flatly deny the existence of these?
That is true what he said. UN special rapporteurs are on record.
Let me ask my colleague.
We are working very closely with UN special rapporteurs. Geneva.
But have you invited them to visit the country?
They always request us to come to the country. We always allow that.
And how
I don't
about
know of any record where we didn't allow it.
And are you going to take them to the? Are you going to take them to some of the prisons we heard mentioned earlier, where some of these people might be
Actually,
held?
UN Special Rapporteur has visited Bangladesh's prison once.
It's not a question of inviting them. There have been complaints, there have been requests made by the special rapporteurs that your government has not replied to and not engaged with in any way.
Okay, just before we finish, one last couple of questions from me, very quickly. You're an advisor to Sheikh Hasina. You've been for years. You represent her here on the international stage. You know that she is now widely considered by many people, many journalists, many governments, to be leading Bangladesh towards an authoritarian destination. You may not agree with that view, but you know that is the view of many people. Do you feed that view back to her? Does she care? Because there's a quote from her son where he says that she thinks it's a badge of honor to be called authoritarian.
Well, no, what he was saying is, Lee Kuan Yew has been called an authoritarian person. The Prime Minister of Malaysia, Mahathir Mohamad, has been called. So he was putting it in that context. My point is this: yes, these things have been said. We have heard it. We have heard it, and we hear it again and again. I think the reality is very different. We have had regular elections, not only at the
No, you've made this point. Yeah. I'm asking about her. What is her attitude when you tell her? This is what people say to me. You travel around the world, and people raise these complaints. What do you say to her?
She reads newspapers.
Yeah.
She reads, gets her
Does it bother her?
Daily briefing, and she knows that this is not what she is.
And does it bother you? You're an academic, a scholar, people have a lot of time for you. You've taught at Harvard, Oxford, before you joined this government. Do you ever think, you know what, this is hard work going around defending Sheikh Hasina, time to head back to academia?
I can tell you one thing. While I would love to do that, let me say to you, I am truly delighted to be able to stand and speak for a person who has qualitatively changed the lives of millions of people in Bangladesh. That is, and as she has promised herself, that she is going to address many of the questions that have been raised. So I think we should applaud her for what she has achieved. We should give her the credit where the credit is due, and to start believing that somewhere in the middle, because some people say she is very good, some people say she is very bad, so we take the middle route. No, let's be a little bit more.
But you have no plans to retire anytime soon?
I'm 70. I'm 70 this year.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. And I have writing aspirations, but at the same time, I'm very privileged and honored to serve Sheikh Hasina.
Gauhar Rizvi, thank you very much for joining me on Head to Head. That's our show. Head to Head will be back next week. Thank you.